Welcome back to another exciting edition of the Pointless Exercise Podcast. It's time to remember this crap with Mike Donahue. Mike, how are you?
Good, Andy. Looking forward to some baseball, I think.
Yeah,
You?
of course.
I mean,
The,
such as it is.
yeah, I believe that's what they're going to call it over there on the north side.
I,
Um,
you know, I'm having cataract surgery on Tuesday. I think I mentioned this
are
to
you
you
having them
offline
installed or
before.
removed?
I'm having them I'm thinking of having an extra layer
Yeah.
installed right in time for the opener.
Frank Schwindel might look good through an extra layer of
Yeah,
haze.
I am questioning my decision to do it so close to the beginning of the season. In fact, I was originally planning on going to the opener and then decided not to because I don't know how I might react after 48 hours, and it might not be in my best interest to have perfect vision on April 7th. So I guess I was trying to be prudent and decided not to go to the opener, pass up the opportunity, and just try to get my eyes fixed and maybe not test them too much by exposing them to the Cubs so much. We'll see.
So
I don't want to be too negative.
no, no. We're recording this on the 31st of March, the evening, and on April 1st, April Fool's Day, perfect timing, is the 1 year anniversary uh, of the paywall going up on the Pointless Exercise newsletter. Of course, made it the quality went way up too. I would right, I'm sure it did. Um, so for those of you who were an early subscriber, you are about to get renewed. You don't have to do anything other than make sure that your credit card has not expired, and then just more hilarity. Another year of hilarity will come your way.
Make sure the funds are there.
And for those of
Kids
you who
for
haven't subscribed, I mean, what the hell are you waiting for?
yeah, right?
You can go to pointlessexercise.com. You can take care of that. So, all right. So we're about to spin the wheel of crap and
Before
see what
we
season
do,
we get.
I just want to kind of give a quick assessment because last week it turned out to be a momentous week because in this silly exercise that we've been engaging in for over a year now. We're chronicling a 32-year period. Last week, when we did 1980 and the Bill Buckner, Preston Gomez Cubs, that was our 16th episode. So
Oh, we're
we,
halfway.
I didn't recognize it at the time. We we we're on the downslope now, and so if in case you're curious, folks, you can listen to any random season between 1979 and 2011, or 1980 and 2011, most of which are that have been recorded or revolve around the 1990s. So if that's your thing, no shortage of it. And but yeah, we'll see where we go from here. But yeah, halfway through, just thought I'd mention it.
All right. Well, here we go. And if you've missed any of the first 16, they're all still there for you. You can just go to wherever your fine podcast provider is, and they're easy to find on the Pointless Exercise podcast feed.
I find that if you're on Spotify and if you were to Google a season in which we did, and you just simply went in the search bar, 1989 Cubs, this will be the first hit on Spotify because there's just nobody else
Oh,
putting out that kind of specific content.
yeah. Well, I got pulled it with the Swedes. They make sure that the Pointless Exercise stuff goes right to the top. Uh-oh.
That's all right. We're used to
Oh,
the 90s.
this is an interesting one, and it's a perfect season to have coming off of a work stoppage like we are
It's a
right
late
now,
start.
because it's the 1995 Cubs. The well, I don't want to give away any. We'll let you start with your 5 facts, but
For sure. Well, I'll touch upon what you just said to make it relevant and topical to today. Late start to the season. Part of the reason why we wondered earlier how Brian McRae was acquired on April 1st, which seemed awfully close to the beginning of the season. It turned out it was still 3 weeks before the opener, which, fact number two, happened in Cincinnati. Cubs opening day starter in 1995 was Jim Bullinger,
hey,
former closer. 1995 was also the year in which Joe Kamak and his nacho helmet that he wore to the plate when he batted hit his only career home run. Shout out to Chris Troja if he happens to listen, because Joe Kamak was one of Chris's favorite ball players. 1995 was also, I can't believe we're doing this season. It's also the year in which our future buddy John Murray got his ass kicked on the pitcher's mound in late September, game against the Astros
It's going
against
to
Randy
happen.
Myers. And it did happen, folks, and it was quite hysterical at the time. Other than that, 1995, the ultimate anomaly is that this is not a team that we actually, in all earnestness, classify with not even just playoff teams, but contenders like the 2001 Cubs and the 2004 Cubs, and of course, the playoff, the ones that broke through, like in 84, 89, 98. We don't classify this Cubs team as part of that just because it didn't feel like it the entire season. But believe it or not, this team was not eliminated from the playoffs until the penultimate day of the season. And it was thrilling because they had a late homestand. There was a 7-game homestand in which Frank Castillo almost threw no-hitter, and the Cubs just ran off a bunch of wins and were suddenly alive. It was all for naught, and probably for the best, because the 1995 Cubs, entertaining at times, just like a lot of other Cub teams from the 90s, mediocrity by design, not very good.
So this 1995 was also the start of a new regime.
True.
The Cubs hired Ryan Poles and Matt Eberflus. They hired Ed Lynch to be the general manager. He got hired right after he got hired during the strike.
That's right.
Congratulations. And then also hired during the strike the manager, Jim Riggleman.
Our guy, Riggs. That's right. Year one.
Coming off a long stretch of bad with the Padres. But the
Yeah,
Cubs saw something in there that they knew.
It was an interesting time in that period, because we've hashed it over about how the Tribune company, after they got rid of Dallas Green in 87, and then after Jim Fry just overextended himself in 91, set a course to shoot for the middle and really kind of maybe get lucky, which they did, a couple times. 95 was almost one of them. But even within then, they would make decisions like fire Larry Himes after only 2 seasons. Larry was not disappointing the bottom line. He helped let Greg Maddux go and replace them with that whole coterie of, mediocrity. Himes kind of did his job somehow, but was so awful in 94 that, even the Tribune company decided, well, yeah, we can still do a little bit finer. And then they brought in the sweater vested Andy MacPhail from Minnesota.
Right, I guess I should have brought that up, because that was the first.
That was it.
He got hired. He hired Lynch. Lynch hired Riggleman.
And it was a promotion for MacPhail, who had accidentally presided over 2 World Series winners, accidentally and mystifyingly, to his credit, because he deserves very little, especially for the 87 Twins.
Right.
91, some credit. Still happens.
That was he had to make the sweet music Frankie Viola trade, right? He had to get.
That's right. Well, no, he made that trade in 89 to sabotage the Cubs, his future employers, to the Mets, but he got Kevin Tapani and Rick Aguilera.
Didn't he got Frank, and then he traded away Frank, I think. Both.
Yes. Well, he acquired him, and I don't even know if he would get credit for cultivating a young Frank Viola in the Twins farm system. If Viola was the ace of the 87 Twins, in which MacPhail had sort of found himself in charge, even though he had little to do with all of those young players. But 91, he made a few trades that worked.
No, he would have got. I always thought
he's a fraud. Yeah, I wrote 30,000 words somewhere out in the interwebs about what an absolute fraud Andy MacPhail was for the Twins.
Yeah, MacPhail was a 1981 draft pick of the.
And I don't think MacPhail was named the general manager of the Twins till late 84, sometime around when the Billy Gardner Twins flamed out. But by 87, you had a team that won 87 games. I'm not looking at it. I kind of had it in canon. I kind of had it down pat at one point, but it was a team that he had absolutely little to do with. It was Viola, who he didn't draft, Blyleven, for whom he didn't trade. He didn't draft Kirby Puckett, right? Kirby was on the 87 Twins. Herbeck was None of those guys. I don't think he did anything for the 87 Twins. And they weren't even that good, but then rode this hot streak, became the first dome team to, make a World Series and then become the first World Series team to win a 7-game series without winning a road game, which they then repeated 4 years later when MacPhail might be given credit for having acquired future Cubs, Kevin Tapani and Rick Aguilera, for the aforementioned Frank Viola. Yep. And he did that in a season 2 years earlier in which the Cubs were trying to fend off the Mets. Turned out not to matter. MacPhail's, inadvertent attempts to sabotage the Cubs did not yield fruit in 89. But, in 91, he did make that trade. I don't know, was Dan Gladden was the 87. That might have been one of MacPhail's 87 acquisitions. But 91, maybe a couple moves, but it was still just inertia, a little bit of luck. And I don't know. He proved basically without a doubt in his 10-year, 11-year run with the Cubs. He got a long run with the Cubs, even when he got demoted, as we talked about, as general manager at one point. In that run, he pretty much demonstrated he didn't know what the fuck he's doing as far as just building a baseball team organizationally and at the major league level through trades. So, but he got his promotion based on those two aforementioned that I just discussed, those ill-gotten world championships, and was able to step up when the Tribune Company came around looking for the most milquetoast motherfucker that might be around to carry out their mediocrity by design. He's the avatar, really.
So did you know that Kirby Puckett and Lance Johnson were teammates at Triton College?
I did not. I did not know that Lance Johnson played for Triton. I know Kirby did.
Not only did they both play there, they played there together.
Wow. Did you know that before tonight?
Yes, because I would get regaled with, that's the same conference as Rock Valley College, and I would get regaled with stories of the old baseball field, the one where it sloped away and the right fielder would disappear if you were standing on the third. River. They would be like, guys would point like, yeah, Kirby hit one there and there. The Des Plaines River, that's not.
I think it's nearby. There's something. Triton. Swampy, yeah. Well,
I never went to Triton.
My only experience with Triton was. Oh, you're talking about
they were at Rock Valley. They were point to places.
Sorry, my bad. Yeah. Well, I only
that
know
would have
Triton.
Been about the time that noted Yankee wife swapper Fritz Peterson was the head coach of the Rock Valley College baseball team.
Terrific.
Yes.
That's great. My only experience with Triton was recent. I got both of my COVID vaccination shots there and passed by the very handsome-looking Kirby Puckett baseball field.
There you go. Wonder what Lance got named after him. The ball bag. One dog needs some respect. I got crap when I wrote that the Cubs have only had one season of Bob Dernier, 2 seasons of Dexter Fowler, and 2 months of Kenny Lofton. And people are like, what about Lance Johnson? Like, well, I don't feel like I accidentally left him off.
We talked about the 98 Cubs. He came back late, but Brant Brown carried that team in center field. I'm not dismissing the one dog's contribution to the Cubs. He did, to some extent. Aside from that, I'm still reeling from the fact that I never knew Lance Johnson played at Triton. Is he a Chicago guy? Why would he? Kirby was. Kirby grew up in Cabrini Green. I'm just like Lance Johnson. I had no idea that he had a Chicago connection.
Let's look him up.
Other than the one time that we got confused and saw that he was one of the league leaders.
No, he must have got recruited there. He went to high school in Cincinnati.
Okay.
But he played at Triton, and he was a 31st round pick in 1982 out of Triton by the Mariners. Kirby was a first round pick out of by the Twins.
But not by Andy MacPhail, just for the record.
Not by Andy MacPhail. One dog went. He transferred. Then he didn't go pro. He went to the University of South Alabama in Mobile.
Is that where John Lester may have pitched? I want to say.
Well, that sounds right. And then in 1984, he was a 6th round pick of the Cardinals. And he actually broke in with the Cardinals before he got traded to the White Sox. Who did he get traded from the Cardinals to the White Sox for?
From when some corn pone former batting gloves donner.
Oh, this is great. This was. This would have been Ron. Was it Ron? Who took over for Hawk?
What's the year? Hawk after Hawk was.
Was it Ron?
Hawk. No,
whoever was cleaning up.
It was Himes. It was Larry Himes.
Right. Larry Himes was cleaning up the detritus. He traded Jose De Leon to the Cardinals for
Bobby Bonilla. This is the Bobby Bonilla trade.
Well, it's the Bobby. That's how they got Jose. Hawk did that. And then Larry's
Hawk,
like, all right.
all right.
He's like, all
Just
right,
to reiterate,
we got to
Hawk
get.
Harrelson traded Bobby Bonilla for Jose De Leon.
Yes.
Who many people wouldn't know who Jose De Leon is.
Okay. So then
Sorry.
Himes said, all right, we got to get rid of Jose De Leon. Traded him to the Cardinals for Lance Johnson and current Cardinal announcer and one of the most annoying people in the world, Ricky Horton. So
the left-hander.
I don't know, right-handed, left-handed. He's an asshole. No matter what.
I remember Ricky Horton. I didn't know he was a Cardinal broadcaster.
Oh yeah, he's got kind of a high-pitched voice, which makes it even better. 1995, I think best known for the aggressive Ed Lynch. Do you remember the move he made when they were going for it? And this is I believe the last time these two teams have made a trade.
Well, there were two. All right. Well, there are two trades that I want to talk about, and I know the one you want to talk about, and that would be when Lynch dealt Mike Morgan, who had hitched his wagon to Greg Maddox's star a couple years earlier, and then it was just getting pummeled, and got Todd Zeile,
yes,
who homered in his first game as a Cub, in a game in which I was at, which I might want to share a quick anecdote, but maybe not now. But I was at Todd Zeile's first appearance. It was against the Dodgers, and Billy Ashley was the Dodger left fielder. I'll just keep going here because I got to tell you, I was watching the game on the day before on Friday at one of our quote-unquote long lunches that sometimes me and my coworkers would have. And, it was a weekend series. So, of course, the Cubs are playing on a Friday afternoon. And I heard Steve Stone point out about how this young Dodger prospect, Billy Ashley, has a lot of Dave Kingman in him. And I remembered that and said, oh, I'm going to the game the next day. Went to the city that night, up all night, probably like 4 hours of sleep because I'm 23 years old in 1995. Head up from UIC to Wrigleyville, get there super early or sitting in the seats, watching batting practice, and I am just riding Billy Ashley. I'm just calling him Albuquerque Ashley, right? Billy Ashley proceeds to hit 2 home runs that day. Oh. So there you go. Yeah. So I felt that's how it works.
Okay, so a couple of things before we get to the other trade. A couple of things about the Todd Zeile trade. The Cubs had to give up 3 guys to get Todd Zeile.
Not just Mike Morgan?
Mike Morgan, and then the immortal Francisco Morales and Paul Torres. And they got Cash and Todd Zeile. Zeile was famously a converted catcher who the Cardinals had moved to third base. They had then moved him to left field, and that's what he was going to play for the Cubs. And it lasted, like a week and a half. And he was back playing third base, which he was not really very good at. But, yeah.
Wither Steve Buechele.
Well, how can anybody replace Steve Buechele? So I had to ask, is that the last time that the Cubs and Cardinals have traded with each other? And it is not.
No, we talked about it, and you edified me on this. It's the Chris Carpenter who's not that Chris Carpenter for Theo. No, I'm sorry. No, that's a different one.
That's the Red Sox.
I'm confused. No, you're right. Never mind. It's not a memorable
trade. There have actually been 2 trades between the teams since then. And they're both huge, earth-shattering trades, which I don't know why everyone doesn't remember them. They both were, the first one was a waiver trade when you used to be able to do that. So clearly what happened was the Cubs waived the troll, Jeff
Facero.
And the Cardinals claimed him. And the Cubs, I guess, could have pulled him back. Instead, they worked out a deal where the Cardinals sent 2 guys, Jared Blasdell and Jason Carnuth, to the Cubs. And then on July 4th, 2007, the Cubs acquired John Nelson as part of a conditional deal. In other words, I think it was basically, you have to take John Nelson, whoever that is. But more interesting than those 2 is, what do you think the last trade before the Todd Zeile trade was between the 2 teams?
Bruce Sutter and Leon Durham?
Yes. They had gone 15 years between trades.
Wow.
Before they...
wow.
How many years here?
All right. No, so since Bruce Sutter was dealt for Leon Durham and Ken Reitz and maybe Mike Tyson. No, Mike
15
Tyson
years
separately. All right. So since then, there's been the Todd Zeile trade and then these two insignificant trades since 1980.
Right. They went from, December to my birthday in 1980, my 8th birthday.
Oh, well, happy birthday, Andy. Bruce Suter's gone.
Bruce
But you
Suter's
did get
gone
Leon Durham.
For Leon Durham and Ken Raitz. Before that, the year before,
Ted Sizemore?
Donnie Moore to the Cardinals from Mike Tyson.
Oh.
And then in 1977, after the season, Cubs traded Jerry Morales, Steve Swisher, and Cash to the Cardinals for Hector Cruz and Dave Rader.
I remember Heidi Cruz.
Not Doug Rader, Dave Rader.
Right. I remember Heidi Cruz he came around a second time in the early 80s, and I believe he was Jose Cruz's brother. That Jose Cruz of the Astros, who was always considered the most underrated player in the league until everyone kept talking about it, and then it couldn't be true anymore.
These two teams traded all the time in the 70s.
Until the Suter trade.
Actually, in the 60s. Oh, there's a crap load in the 60s. Doesn't make any sense. I like it now when they won't even talk to each other, much less trade.
I mean, that's crazy. By the way, Donnie Moore, we're going to bring him up, not for reasons you might think. I'm going to bring him up to the extent that last week when we did the 1980 Cubs, I thought about this a little bit further. I'm going to just go out on a limb, and I'd put a little bit of money on it, that no team in the history of baseball, has ever had one pitching staff of as many guys who collectively over the course of the career would have as many saves as all of the members on the 1980 Cubs, which was the only year in which Bruce Suter and Lee Smith intersected. But of course, there was Donnie Moore, there was Bill Caudle, even Dennis Lamp was filtered. I didn't even mention, probably because he wasn't on the 1980 Cubs, Donnie Moore. Never mind. Yeah, but he also was a early era Cub who became a dominant closer until a certain day.
Yeah, which ended with.
We haven't. We could talk about it. We talked 1986. We haven't talked the 86 Cubs. We could talk about the Bill Buckner in the World Series that year too.
Yeah, it was a bad. It was a great postseason.
Bad year for ex-Cubs. I never drew the
season for Mike Royko's ex-Cub factor theory.
Right. One blew his brains out. The other is just haunted to comical proportions.
Yeah, both dead now.
They are.
So what was the other trade that you remember from 1995?
The other trade was when Ed Lynch did one of his few positive trades and seemingly, absolutely, apparently pantsed Bob Watson of also division rival Astros. And yet it didn't stop Bob Watson from himself getting promoted to become the Yankees general manager after that season and during their first World Series winner before himself being supplanted by Brian, whatever his name is. It's Cashman?
Yes.
But that trade was basically what the trade was the Cubs had Rick Wilkins, whom we haven't done 1993. That's the Rick Wilkins year, but we've talked about Rick Wilkins. Came on as a rookie in 92, had a 30 homer season in 93, and then fell off the face of the earth. And in 95, somewhere mid-season, Ed Lynch convinced Bob Watson to take Rick Wilkins for the, no pun intended, the serviceable Scott Servais, but also Luis Gonzalez, pre-steroids, so it wasn't like, the Cubs totally benefited from it, but they totally made on that trade because I want to say Wilkins went on the DL right away, and I believe there might have been some news, Bob Watson may have made some noise about Ed Lynch fucking him over and not reporting injuries, or I may have imagined that, or might have seemed one of those things where, how did Rick Wilkins just go on the DL as soon as that trade happened?
He slipped on the people mover at O'Hare on his way to the airplane.
Right. As Ed Lynch
trade was already done. Sorry, Bob.
Well, and when you consider how the season ended, which we will get to, folks, because there was a last minute out of the blue pennant chase for a few days, and it involved the Astros. So I always feel like, Jesus, it would make Bob Watson look like an absolute asshole that got taken, and yet again, Bob Watson got promoted to be the Yankees general manager after the season.
I just the Wikipedia page for the 95 Cubs, somebody just kind of phoned in the notable transactions section. They only have 5 of them. and here they are. April 5th. This is Brian McRae traded by the Royals to the Cubs for Derek Wallace and Gino Moronis, who you can
Would
hear
that be
on.
former Cub first round pick Derek Wallace,
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken?
And Gio Moronis, of course, yacht rock superstar. Wait, that's a different name. How about this? May 24th, 1995. Felix Jose signed as a free agent by the Cubs.
The Cubs? They had Felix Jose? And was Harry still saying,
I
want to call him Jose Felix?
It gets better. May 26th. Carl Tuffy Rhodes selected off of waivers by the Boston Red Sox from the Cubs. So
goes 13 months after his opener. Yeah.
June 1st, 1995. Kerry Wood drafted in the first round with the 4th pick.
The first pick of the MacPhail era.
And then this is the last one they list. June 1st, 1995, 8 days after he was signed, Felix Jose released by the Chicago Cubs.
So no mention of the Zeile trade, or
no Zeile trade. No.
And why are you looking at Wikipedia and not?
All I did, I googled 1995 Cub trades, and it popped up, and I was like, "Oh, here we go. This will help." And
whoever was compiling that just got too depressed. There's no action. He gave up too soon. There were 2 big trades, and I mean, again, this team is not like a shitty team, but they were not good, but they, had things bounced the right way. So all of those trades probably contributed to.
Yeah. So the June 28th was the Rick Wilkins to the Astros for Luis Gonzalez and Scott Servais. Let's see if we do the. It's going to be one of those things where it's going to say, Rick Wilkins, player traded from the Astros to the Cubs, and there's going to be a long gap without him actually playing. And then
right. So that came before the Zeile trade, or no? You already covered the Zeile trade. So
here's what happened. Bob Watson's full of shit. He got traded on the 28th. June 30th, he pinch hit against the Pirates in a 12
as an Astro. We're talking about Rick Wilkins.
And then he got 4 at-bats on July 1st, and then he didn't play again until September 9th. So he missed 2 months right after. He played 2 games for the Astros and then was out for 2 months.
5 plate appearances.
Yeah. They won the trade.
Yes, that was one of Ed Lynch's rare victories, just like when he got John Lieber for Brant Brown.
So this is one of those things. I won't be able to remember the specifics. I don't remember it happened in 95 or it happened. Servais played 96 and 7, right?
And 98. He got the RBI in the Kevin Tapani game that Tap couldn't hold up before Javi Lopez homered. So, yeah, he went all the way through 98. So, Cubs got their mileage out of that trade.
Yeah. So for his lack of he's not exactly an offensive force. But he did one of the most ridiculous things I think any baseball player has ever done. He got blown up at home plate by a runner. He held on to the ball. He tagged him out. And then he's laying on the ground dead. And somebody yelled, "Third, third, third." And he popped up and threw a strike to third where he nailed a runner. And then he went on the disabled list with a separated right shoulder. He threw a guy out at third with a separated shoulder. Pretty good.
Wisconsin guy, hardy Midwestern folk.
But he would eventually get. Well, no, he didn't get replaced by Damian Miller. That was different.
After Scotty, no, it was Finito Santiago. We haven't done the 99 Cubs. You wait.
Yeah. My favorite Damian Miller moment was not even when he was a Cub. It was
video game.
Yeah, where because he was a scab, he was not allowed to be in the game.
He and Rick Reed.
He's a 2001 All-Star because he played for the Diamondbacks, and Bob Brenly put every one of his, or 2002 All-Star. Bob Brenly put every one of the 2001 Diamondbacks on the All-Star game.
I didn't know that. And that's the All-Star game that fucked up the All-Star.
Yeah, the one that was in Milwaukee. Yes, so that's another reason why they wanted to have Damian Miller. So my friend Charlie and I are there for the All-Star game, sitting in the right field bleachers at Miller Park. And these guys, about 3 rows in front of us, unfurled this bed sheet where they had hand-painted a Damian Miller rules sign on it. and it's like the scene in The Waterboy where the, Bobby Boucher's mom puts his sheets up and there's piss stains all over it. It's pretty much what that, pretty much exactly what that bed sheet looked like that had Damian Miller rules
Right.
painted on it. Yeah.
Well, I don't want to get a new bed sheet at Walmart.
I guess their mom is like, no, we're not. You're not ruining a perfectly good one. Take that one.
Right, right. It's in the closets for when Grandma stays over. Yeah,
The rubber sheet. Yeah. So the Brian McRae trade, or the Luis Gonzalez trade basically opened up left field for nobody. Todd Zeile played. They had quite an assortment of outfielders.
I can't quite figure out. Yeah, all I can tell you when I think about the '95 Cubs was late start, just like this season, but not as late. 3 weeks later. And that the Cubs were like rocking back and forth. Like there was a game in July that I was at where at first, I saw Shawon Dunston hit a lead-changing walk-off homer off of a former Cub, Heath Slocum. They were like in it, and it was this is the what's funny is this is the first year of the three. Actually, it's the second year of the three divisional, the realigned playoff format. Right, like '94 is supposed to be the first year of the three divisions in each league, but they didn't have a playoff. So '95 was the first year that it happened. Just so turned out, as mediocre as the Cubs were, had they been in the old 6-team National League two division format, they would have won the National League East.
Wow.
All of the teams that made the playoffs were in the old National League West, but doesn't mean that they're any good. But they weren't that shitty either. The Reds were like the team to beat that year. And '95, you'll remember too, is the summer in which a whole lot of like old and like obese people died in Chicago when the heat wave got like up to 120. And, I think it was a coast to coast. I remember that was the weekend the Cubs and the Reds played it was in July. And I remember driving. I didn't have air conditioning in my car, and I was driving to the Thursday night game, the day of the first day of all.
You put your both feet up above the dashboard. And kicked the windshield out.
I was shirtless, motherfucker. I was shirtless, driving down Lakeshore Drive, trying to get to a Cubs game.
Yeah,
and in that Cubs game,
Impala,
right? And it was awesome. I think it was the first game after the All-Star break. It was against the Reds, I know. But in this game, and the Cubs were kind of alive, but the Reds were a pretty good team, and they would, of course, go to the playoffs before Reggie Sanders struck out like 25 times in the LDS, and they got swept. But in this game, Turk Wendell was a starter for the Cubs. The game time temperature 7:05 at night. I remember because they would announce it at Wrigley Field. They would, everyone settled in. A national anthem has been sung. Cubs have taken the field. Pitchers made his warm-ups. And then game time temperature, which they did every day, and it was a night game, and it was, I think, 104 degrees is what it said at 7 o'clock at night. And, of course, people were dying all across the city, and I'm watching Turk Wendell in a very huge series, against the Reds, who were better. I believe the Cubs may have gotten swept. It was a 4-game series. But that's what Pat Hughes might call a turning point of the 1995 season. I didn't mean to just jump to mid-July, Andy. There might be some April, May, June games that you would like to circle back to and revisit. But, to fast forward a bit, the Cubs, as far as they're being in contention, that was an opportunity for them to make up some ground, and they completely didn't.
Well, we're talking about the Cubs would have won the old National League East that year.
Yes.
Reminded me that just a couple of years before that, the last year of the two divisions, baseball had a realignment plan that would have put the Cubs and the Cardinals in the NL West. And the Cubs and Cardinals threw a royal fit, one of the few times the two teams agreed on something, and basically said, no, we're not going to fucking go. You can't make us.
So that they were
kind
aligned.
of the reason they ended up with the three divisions. They just threw everything. They said, "All right, fine. We need to fix this. Here's how we're going to fix it."
Because you're saying because of the Cubs Cardinals, they weren't insisting on a 2-division format.
No, the Cubs and Cardinals said we were not going to put us in a whatever it would have been 8-team NL West, where we're going to have all those freaking West Coast games that our fans are going to sleep through.
Right.
No, we're not going to
I
go.
can't believe that would have even been considered in as opposed to breaking it out to a 3-division format at that point. Because when we grew up, the National League, both divisions had 6 teams. The American League teams had 7. It just seemed kind of nuts.
Do you want to hear my theory that I just came up with about how the Todd Zeile trade actually was a horrible thing for the Cubs in the long term? Because that was a product of the Cardinals firing Joe Torre during the season.
Oh, ushered in the La Russa era.
And then they brought in Mike Jorgensen to finish the season.
Manager.
Now, if Todd Zeile stays with the Cardinals and just lights it up, Mike Jorgensen is managing the Cardinals through all those glory years. There's no Mark McGwire and Dennis Eckersley never play for the Cardinals.
Right. Tony La Russa is coaxed.
Dave McKay and his bag of needles never make it to St. Louis.
His magical medicine cabinet, yeah.
And it's all because the Cubs couldn't help themselves, and they took superstar Todd Zeile off their hands. I believe Todd Zeile, he's a UCLA grad. I believe he's married to an Olympic gymnast.
Is that right?
I believe so.
Is it Nadia Comaneci?
No, it's
Mary Lou Retton? Is it Kerry?
It's Bart Connor. No. No.
Mitch Gaylord?
Julianne McNamara, an American. Okay. Oh, she just doesn't count. She was a rhythmic gymnast with the rhythms and stuff.
Right. She's got the scarves.
She won a gold medal. She won the first. She won the first gold medal ever in that ridiculous sport.
So she's iconic.
Married to
just like Todd
Zeile,
a
gold medal winner.
Well, but she herself not married to a gold glover, I assume.
Yeah, not married to Mary Lou Retton.
No. Well, and Todd Zeile did not come back for the 1996 Cubs.
There's a picture of her on a balance beam. They don't have her with a little ribbon. Anyway, I think I've run out of Todd Zeile knowledge, knowing that he married.
Yeah, I've shared my story about being in his game and heckling Billy Ashley till it blew up in my face. I don't know if Todd Zeile did anything down the stretch, but anyway,
he didn't do.
Yeah,
he was okay. They gave up nothing. They gave up nothing to get him, and they pretty much got nothing when they got him.
Mike Morgan was washed up, but
actually,
not so washed up.
Actually, looking at it, I don't think he was very good.
Mike Morgan
was
washed
Cubs,
up, but not so washed up that he didn't come back 3 years.
So when they got him, he was hitting .291. He was .378 on base, .457 slug. And after he got to the Cubs, .227, .271, .371. He was bad. They let him go.
He sucked.
And the next year he signed with the Phillies, and he hit 20 homers and drove in 89 runs for the Phillies and the Orioles. So he must have got traded.
Didn't he play with the Dodgers too later on?
Yep, played with the Dodgers, the Marlins, the Rangers, the Mets, the Rockies, the Yankees, the Expos, and then he finished up with the Mets. So he played 16 seasons.
Wow.
For 11 teams.
I want to say he was like a Rookie of the Year runner-up or something too when he first came up with the Shitbirds.
He finished 6th in balloting in 1990 for Rookie of the Year.
That's it. All right. That was the year David Justice and Mike Harkey would have been runner-up. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Let's see here.
I dare you. Correct me.
Yes. He finished he finished 6th behind, yes, the aforementioned David Justice, who won the award. And then former Cubs, Delino DeShields, and Mike Harkey.
Future Cub. Yeah, well, Mike Harkey was a Cub because that was the 3rd straight year that a Cub had been runner-up for Rookie of the Year. Grayson 88 and Dwight Smith in 89.
And in between Delino and Harkey were Hal Morris and John Burkett.
Well, you can't win them all.
It's quite a yeah. If you just look at the Cubs roster, their pitching staff and their lineup.
I already told you who their opening day starter was,
yes,
Jim Bollinger.
Jim Bollinger.
That doesn't bode well.
We had a homer in his first Big league. Was it at bat? It was the first game.
We've talked about it. No, it was
At bat?
off of Real Cormier.
It was a bomb. I remember that.
Yeah, in Busch Stadium.
Yep. So here were the Cub regulars on your playoff contending, which is this team. Okay, what I'm about to read to you. This is what Tom Ricketts wants Jed to build. Is the 21st century version of this, because you just stay close enough to pretend you're in the pennant race. So obviously they had multiple catchers. Scott Servais and Rick Wilkins played the most, traded for each other. Mark Grace, who at 326, he had a really good year.
It was Grace's first or second best season. He was at his peak as a Cub, and Sammy had his second 30-30 season that year.
The primary second baseman was Ray Sanchez. The primary shortstop was the returning legend Shawon Dunston.
Guy. That's right.
Shawon had 296. How about that? Ha.
He was not returning. He
hadn't left yet.
The various trades. He was returning from a long stint.
That's right. He was returning from trying to take the car seat out of his car.
Right. The first full
season. 2 discs, and he missed a season and a half or some ridiculous.
And I referenced the awesome lead-changing walk-off that he hit off of Slocum that season, which totally happened sometime that summer.
Let's see. Third baseman, Todd Zeile.
And Steve Buechele. And then, of course, at the end of the season... Who am I missing?
Howard Johnson.
Oh, no, not the end of the season. He was there. I think it was beginning of the season, if anything.
Oh, was it? So was the year before? What was the year that was the year before when he showed up?
Well,
they got him off waivers.
No, he was just, that was the one year. He may have hit a walk-off homer for the Cubs that year, like in May or June. I don't think he was even on the team by the end of the year. He was at the end. Hojo himself was a 30-30 guy with his teammate Darryl Strawberry.
He must have got waived during spring training. Cubs signed him on April 13th. They did not. He was there all year.
Yeah. He had one big homer for the 95 Cubs. Not the guy that annoyed us as a Met in the 80s.
He of course, his real nickname was, of course, Hojo, and Harry, when he was a Met, would occasionally get very excited and call him Ho-Ho.
Right. As Ryan Sanderson was warming up.
Yes. DraftKings, a casino queen sportsbook, is officially live with mobile sports betting in Illinois, just in time to get in on all the college basketball mania. Right now, new customers can bet $5 on any tournament team to win their game and get $200 in free bets if they do. It's that simple. If they win, you win. Go down to Wrigley, sign up in front of the marquee. Go down to the UC, sign up in front of the Jordan statue. Go find a college campus and sign up on the quad. As long as you're in Illinois, you could sign up and bet from anywhere right from the palm of your hand. Head to the DraftKings, the Casino Queen Sportsbook app now to check out all the great promotions and features, including same-game parlays. It's safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. Download the DraftKings, the Casino Queen Sportsbook app now. Use promo code POINTLESS. Bet $5 on any college basketball team to win and get $200 in free bets. If they win, you win with promo code POINTLESS this week at DraftKings, the Casino Queen Sportsbook. 21 and older, Illinois only. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 1-800-426-2537. See, this is where it's really hard. So, you look here, okay, so Buechele, Howard Johnson, and Todd Zeile playing third base for you. Left field was a pre-steroid.
Ozzie Timmons, Scott Bullett.
Pre-steroid Luis Gonzalez for the first 77 games.
Mid-season acquisition because he was the other part of the.
Oh, that's right. He came in late. God, I'm just struggling here.
It's all right, man. I got it down. I'm 95
he hit good. He
back of my
hit
hand.
290.
He was a serviceable player.
384 on base, 473 slug.
Nothing like he would become, obviously,
and
for obvious reasons.
He had a lot of power. 7 homers, 34 RBIs.
Yeah, he was not a power hitter at the Cubs. No.
Brian McRae had a decent year in center field.
It was his first year at the Cubs, and it was probably his best year. And he had 2 really good years with the Cubs, and then he sucked ass in '97. He arrived, and he was kind of what they needed. He had that flair. He was the leadoff hitter, played a good center field. So a lot of love for Brian McRae in '95, a lot of hate for Brian McRae in '97.
This was Sammy's first 30-30 season? Is this
Second.
right?
First
This
was
is
in
the second
'93. Yeah.
one. Sammy, 268,
Still
340, 500, pre-steroids, 36 homers,
as far as
119
we know.
RBIs,
Yeah, pretty good.
and 34 stolen bases. Got caught 7 times. That's not terrible. 34
No,
out of
pretty
41.
good. Well, he got criticized by Ron Santo
Yeah.
on the air in September of '93. The first year he went 30-30 because that team was also very similar. By the way, I have to stop for a minute and say that we've done 7 years of the 1990s, and outside of 1998, they've all been under 500. What's left besides 1990 are 2 rare 500 teams that didn't make the playoffs because 93 is the other one. But 93 is the other season in which Sosa did do 30-30, and that was the first time. And I remember in September, I was at Northern, and he listening to the game, and he got caught stealing. And the Cubs, like in '95, were a 500 team. They weren't quite in it down the stretch, and Sano was tearing Sammy a new one. But what's interesting that in between those years, Sosa inexplicably, we just kind of discovered this. We brought it up in '94. He hit 300 in the strike shortened '94 season, and then it comes back in '95. So even before he became a really good all-around hitter, like beginning in '96, which we talked about, when he started laying off the outside pitch, he like already had, with all of his raw talent, he had already produced some pretty significant things, and he was far from what he would become. And I'm not even referring to any assistance he had. To his credit, he became a more patient hitter and like whatever. But yeah, 95 was his second 30-30 season. He was still pretty damn young. So
Well, he was almost not a Cub in 1995.
Right. Red Sox? No.
Yes, he had signed he had been declared a free agent, and he signed with the Red Sox.
And because his benefactor Larry Himes had already been launched, right? So he's thinking that might not have anything to do with it, but.
And so when the how does this work? Because that was the year that now Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor saved baseball, right? By saying that the owners had it was unfair negotiating practice, unfair labor practice, and she reinstituted the old CBA and told them go negotiate a new one. When the old one went back in, a bunch of those guys, including Sammy, were not free agents anymore and had to go back to their teams that they.
So you're saying current Justice Sotomayor is a factor in Sammy's staying with the Cubs in '95 and having a second 30-30 season?
She ended the strike, and they had to go back to they didn't have a labor agreement, so they had to go back to the last one that they had actually codified, which was the reason they were striking. And Sammy was one of those players who was now no longer a free agent. And so he had to his deal with the Red Sox was null and void.
Okay.
And he came back to the Cubs. There were other players. John Wetland signed with somebody. There were several players that.
Wetland from the Expos to the Yankees, maybe. I'm gonna say that worked out to Sammy's advantage. By the way, before we get too far, because it seems that he made the most of his time in Chicago.
The Red Sox lost 3 players because of this. They lost Kevin Appier, John Wetland, and Sammy Sosa. They all had to go back to the Royals, the Expos, and the Cubs.
Wow. Well, the Royals were making big plans. The Red Sox were making good plans. They made the playoffs that year, and they got thumped by the rare 100-win Cleveland team that won 100 games. And the 95 season was only, I want to say, 144-game season. I did, by the way, I made a reference earlier to, in case anyone's interested in the actual flow of the season, there was one Pat Hughes turning point that I kind of talked over. I'm gonna insist we go back, and I put the link in the chat to the Baseball Reference box score. But this was the day that the Cubs were actually only 3 games over. The Reds, I don't even know the Reds offhand had Piniella. Lou was their manager, so Lou's still in that dugout. I'm pretty sure. Right? 1995, Lou Piniella, Reds manager. No, he was gone. He was in Seattle in '95. Never mind. But the Reds
it was Davey Johnson.
Okay, so the Reds were pretty much kind of the odds-on favorite that year, and so I threw a game on there, and I already referenced driving to this game shirtless because it was historically hot. And sure enough, if you do scroll down, I'm not crazy. It was 103 degrees at game time. But I apologize because the starting pitcher for the Cubs was not Turk Wendell.
Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, but Turk did pitch.
It was Steve Traxel.
Yeah, which is what you want when it's 103 degrees at night.
Well, I mean, the reason that you thought Traxel or that Wendell started was that Traxel went an inning and a third, and Turk came in and pitched 5 innings.
Yes, that's it. Right. I see that now because I pulled it up myself. Just for the record, going into this game, the Cubs are 4 games over 500. The Reds were kind of far out in front, so it's kind of a long shot. But we've talked about like 92 when Sosa homered off of Stan Belinda, and we had faint hopes of a pennant fever in late July. This is the peak of mediocrity by design, where like we're 6 years removed now from a playoff appearance. We're going to glom on to anything. And yeah, the Cubs might be, looks like about 9 games behind the Reds, but they're over 500. It's in July. It's 100 degrees out, but you know what? There's a 4-game series coming up. We can really make some hay here, and so that's the setting for a day that is, of course, historic in Chicago annals because it was the first day of the epic heat wave in 1995, and the Cubs played ball that night with the Reds.
Now, do you remember? Did you and the rest of the fans boo the second relief pitcher that the Reds used?
I'm not looking at it, but was it Rob Dibble?
No, it would have been former Giant Mike Jackson. You remember what he's most famous for?
Altering the end of Ryan Sandberg's career.
So everything comes full circle in this podcast. So yes, Mike Jackson hit Ryan Sandberg in the hand in spring training in
2 years earlier, 1993,
and then Sandberg made an abrupt retirement in 1994. Correct.
Correct.
Beginning of the season. And
after
then,
having a season which he didn't have much power after the Jackson pitch.
So then you remember the Cubs winning streak down toward the end of this season in 95, the one where they just get eliminated. Guess who went to a bunch of those games?
Ryan Sandberg.
And that's what made him want to come back.
According to Barry Rosner, that's right.
And the Cubs should have said thanks, but no.
But of course it didn't matter
because they were going to sign the Beige. Everybody knows that was going to happen. That was always like that's the longest rumor ever. That they were going to sign Craig Biggio, and then they couldn't because they had to let Ryan Sandberg come back because they're the Cubs, and he's a legend. And if he wants to come back, you got to let him come back. And nobody knows if that's really true. I'm sure the Cubs would have screwed it.
Well, it wouldn't matter. It sounds like that's pretty hilarious. It sounds like the earliest days of the internet rumors. Talking like 95.
Well, just think how excited Chip Carey would have been if the Beige had been a Cub.
But Chip was not in Chicago yet.
No, but he would have got there, and he fell in love with the Beige just chatting with him around the batting cage. 19 times a year? Imagine if it was 162.
It's a good point.
He'd have left his imaginary wife and kids to run off with the Beige. There'd be no Kevin Biggio playing second base for the Blue Jays.
Kevan.
Because Chip and Craig would be living on Fire Island. I get him adopted, I guess.
So that 103-degree day, the Cubs end up losing the first 3 games of the series before salvaging one, but it's pretty much over. But hey, there's this new wild card thing, right? So they're not out of it, right? They're still, things can happen, things can work to their advantage as long as they sort of hover about. Because again, like I said, remember the Reds would have been in the old National League West. And I don't even know what were the ups and downs of the season, other than like I remember seeing Todd Pratt also catch for the Cubs, and he was so awful as a hitter. I swear I never saw a major league hitter look absolutely so overmatched as I did Todd Pratt 95.
I remember Todd Pratt on third base when there was a wild pitch that he clearly was not going to be able to score on, and he ran anyway, and then he stopped, and then he fell down. It was kind of a mini Cal Daniels.
Nice.
And he just laid there like a slug. All right, so here's another what if. So what if the 95 Cubs start their win streak a little bit earlier, then they edge out the Colorado Rockies
Don Baylor
for that wild card spot. Does that mean Don Baylor never manages the Cubs?
Quite possibly. I mean, Baylor was the original manager of the Colorado Rockies,
that means
right?
Joe Girardi never comes back. And then who is supposed to tell everybody that Darryl Kyle is dead?
Right. That's true.
This is why things happen the way they're supposed to.
Don't question it, people. Let's I think it's probably a good time to jump to. I can't think of any other games. I mean, I referenced the Phillies game in June with Dunston off of Slocum. You can look it up. It happened. It was also the same game in which Joe Kamak hit his only career homer. But I think it probably worth it just to like jump to the end of the season, because I remember when we rolled into September and Harry and Steve were like, I mean, I'm just looking here right now on September 1st. The Cubs were 59 and 58. They were 14 and a half games out of first. I don't know how close they were. They're in contention. And I remember as they kept pointing out that the Cubs had the season ending, I'm counting it now, 6, 7, 8, 10 game homestand, which is pretty unique and unprecedented. And I remember like Steve and Harry coming into September, like we're like, well, we can kind of hang into it. And we get that 10 game homestand, which of course in most years you're like, well, what the fuck? If you're that fucking bad and you're stumbling around and you can't even get 10 games over 500 by Labor Day, like what is the fucking 10 game homestand at the end of the season going to do for you? And yet it kind of almost worked. And I'll just read. I mean, there's one game in that homestand that involves Frank Castillo that we've actually probably talked at length about in a previous podcast, but I guess to make sure we do it justice, we should mention that 1995 was the year in which Frank Castillo threw a no-hitter, almost a no-hitter down the stretch of a so-called pennant race.
So the reason everybody was looking forward to the 10 game homestand was that the first 7 games of that, actually it was more than that. They played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Oh, 11.
Yeah, so 11 game homestand.
I forgot there's a game in October.
The first 7 games of it were against the 2 worst teams in the National League, the Pirates and the Cardinals.
Which is, again, funny that you point out that this is a rare. Cardinals are absolute pretty much.
The Cubs lost the first game of the homestand, but then they didn't lose again until the last 2. They lost
9-game winning streak.
Denny Nagel beat them for the Pirates.
Future 20-game winner.
And then they didn't lose again until the Astros ended them on that last Saturday, and then they lost the last game of the season.
It was pretty exciting. Let me just walk you through. So the first win is a Friday against Pittsburgh. Who cares? Kevin Foster. I'm glad we name checked him. Local guy, Evanston. Moment of silence. One of the many dead 95 Cubs. And maybe should we do another in memoriam for all of the Cubs pitchers? We have not mentioned the other 2 that have. Well, of course, we're about to mention the one that's featured right here, the one hitter. But I'm sorry, Jeremy Gonzalez was not on the 95 Cubs. No. He debuted in 97 is the one year in which all those three played together. But Foster got the winning streak going against the Pirates. Bullinger gets the next one, and then they win some thrilling walk-off against the Pirates.
So the walk-off against the Pirates, the walk-off was a Brian McRae walk-off homer off Dan Maselli. Ooh. But the Cubs also, that was in the 10th inning. The Cubs tied it with 2 outs in the 9th on a Scott Servais single that scored Luis Gonzalez.
Attaboy, Scott.
How about this? It was a line drive to deep first base. I can't picture what that would be. I don't think Scotty was beating it out, so I don't know what happened, but it was not an error. It was a line drive to deep first base.
In the 9th inning. Okay. Wow.
So then Jose Hernandez came up with a chance to win it in regulation, and he popped out to the catcher.
It was Jose Hernandez.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And then Brian McRae hit the walk-off home run. So Dan Maselli gave up the lead in the 9th, and they made him stick around for the 10th. And he gave up the tie, and then he lost.
That's win number 1. Next day, Frank Castillo takes the mound. I go to the game with the seats that I sit in now, but at the time they were just gifted to me by my cousin. Yeah. But I think I told this story where it was late season.
Looks like you weren't. It wasn't crowded.
No, we moved down from those seats in 204 all the way to right behind the bullpen, and I saw Turk Wendell, and I asked Turk if I could have. I was just trying to, I guess, bond with Turk because he was an oddball, eccentric. He would chew licorice. He would dip dirt, supposedly. He would chew, put dirt, not chew tobacco into his gum, chewing gum. And so we were all nervous. We go down there like in the sixth, seventh inning. We all know what's going on. I tap Turk on the shoulder and ask him for some of the dirt that I could maybe put myself. And even Turk thought I was a weirdo, but I was 23 and I was a little bit out of my mind. And Frank Castillo has taken a no-hitter into the ninth inning, and I'm there while this is happening. I should also say that we went to the Cubby Beer after the game. I'll tell you that the Detroit Lions pulled an upset in Monday Night Football against the San Francisco 49ers and George Seifert. All happened on the same day, folks. But still, it was a nice night. I don't know what the weather was, but I recall it was a very pleasant late September evening.
Yes, I was looking at the lineup for the Cardinals that day.
Andy Bennis was the pitcher, right?
Yeah. So Bernard Gilkey, the guy who actually got the only hit. Yeah. Trip Cromer, Ray Langford, Brian Jordan, John Mabry, David Bell, Scott Cooper, Danny Schaefer, and Alan Bennis.
Future Cub John Mabry goes all the way back to 1995. I had no idea.
Yep. Yeah, so with 2 outs in the ninth, you guys were all standing up. It was a 2-2 pitch, and Bernard Gilkey tripled.
The game's probably remembered more fondly by all of the viewers at home, actually, because you might recall that Frank's lovely young bride, Tracy, was prominently featured in Arnie Harris's production during the affairs of the evening.
Kind of like a Sarah Wood wee.
Very much so. And if you Google, I believe there's some YouTube action. I'm sure if you could track it down easily and post. I'm sure you'll post it if you find it. But it's there's a clip. I can't remember how condensed it is. It's not the full game, but it's out there. I remember bemoaning my fate. I was a 23-year-old heartsick Cubs fan who came so close to seeing a no-hitter, talking to my brother who happened to be in attendance at Comiskey Park in 1983 when Milt Wilcox had retired the first.
Crap.
When Milt Wilcox had retired the first 26 White Sox until Jerry Hairston broke it up on the first pitch. And so my brother was quick to tell me, what are you feeling bad about yourself for? I was this close to a perfect game.
Yeah.
I'll never come that close. I'll never come that close again to witnessing. The odds are against it. I know there's a baby that saw 2 perfect games in 1 year. One of them being Philip Humbers. The other is K-Rod. But if you come within 1 out of a no-hitter and you don't see it, that's the closest you're going to get. I'm fine with that. I'm over it. Yes, I was in attendance. Yes, it does sound like it. Anyway, there's still a pennant race going on, right? We don't have time for no-hitters.
Well, that win got them to 500. 69 and 69.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so, but they're, like I said, they're in contention. So there's some real slap fight, taffy pull going on for the National League wild card in 1995. Like the Reds had run off the division. I think it was the Rockies, as you already said, that ended up getting in, but I don't know any specifics about the rest of the Cardinals games. But when things get memorable, and at least in my eye, you're welcome to look at the other 2 Cardinals games, was the Houston series, beginning with the Thursday game.
Right. Well, so the Astros come in and they're just ahead of the Cubs. So they're also chasing the Rockies. So they have
with a catcher in the press box, Rick Wilkins, and the Cubs have 2 guys on the field. Right? I mean, that's what it comes down to. Cubs and Astros who made a trade with each other.
Yeah, so the Astros had, Rick's back, man. He came back for September. And he's
in this game.
He's starting these games.
He was only on the DL from July 1st to September 6th. My bad.
It is funny though. They traded Luis Gonzalez away, and at least in the first game of the series, they started John Cangelosi in left field. And they have former Cub Derek May in right. Whew. This is not a good Astros team. They got the Beige and Bagwell, Derek May, Dave Magadan's playing third base, James Mouton is playing the other Brian Hunter, the skinny Brian Hunter, is playing center field. Craig Shipley's playing shortstop for him.
Wow. That's a playoff team.
But yeah, they come in. The first game was a back and forth.
Well, when you get to James Mouton's homer off of Randy Myers, that's when we'll have to stop and make a diversion. But yes, because it was James Mouton. Former White Sox or future White Sox? I believe a former White Sox at that point. But nevertheless, this Thursday after, and the Cubs are basically, I want to say like the Cubs are not like about to be eliminated, but they're about to be eliminated. Like any loss is pretty much fatal, right? And they somehow find themselves in this position. You know, they're over the euphoria of the Castillo near no-hitter, and then they finish off a sweep of the shitty Cardinals, and you know, all of a sudden they're like, holy shit, Harry and Steve are right. This homestand's important. Let's just win every game. And this back and forth game, the Cubs, they're up 2-0. They're up 5-1, 6-5. It's tied 6-6. They're up 7-6. They're down 8-7. They take the lead. One of the craziest line scores I have to say that you'll ever see, as far as the back and forth. Just, probably, in reality, it's just two above average kind of shitty teams that just can't get out of their own way, it seems like.
Yeah, so we get to the top of the eighth, and it's tied. Actually, the Cubs in the bottom of the seventh were down 7-6, and Scott Servais tied the game with a sac fly.
Once again, bigger hero than we're recognizing.
And Jose Hernandez came up with a chance to give him the lead with 2 on and 2 outs, and he struck out.
God damn it, Jose.
So they go to the top of the eighth, tied at 7, and Turk is pitching, and he gives up a single to the Beige. He strikes out Bagwell, and then Jim Riggleman goes to work. The wheels are spinning. Randy Myers comes in for service. Mark Parent goes into the pitcher spot to catch.
Backup catcher.
Yeah. And then who's managing the Astros at this time? That would have been Larry Dierker.
No, Terry Collins maybe.
Okay.
Was it Terry Collins?
So he counters by pinch hitting Tony Eusebio for Derek May, and Randy says, pfft, and he gets Tony to fly out. So 2 outs, runner on, and he throws a pass ball. Biggio goes to second. Biggio steals third on the next pitch. And then James Mouton hits a 2-run homer that's certain to lose the game for the Cubs. Biggio scores, and Mouton scores, and so then what happens?
Season's over, and then all of a sudden some coked up, drunk-ass stockbroker pops out of his box seats to challenge Randy Myers to a fight, and proceeded to get absolutely mauled. Said fella, don't mean to libel him, but like, hey, he might have even owned up to it. Who knows? But we got to know John and find out how truly obnoxious he really was several years later, a decade later. But nevertheless, in fact, he was quite embarrassed about this incident, was hoping that all of us had sort of forgotten about it. But there are some savants in the crowd.
He's banned from Wrigley for life.
Still.
So the closest he could get in 2003 was the stupid "It's Gonna Happen" signs ubiquitous signs that he handed out that were all over.
Yeah, I can't wait till he desperately sues me for like whatever meager 401k savings I have. But yeah, he I mean, it was front page news. It was insane what happened here because Randy Myers, right? I mean, I think you know more about this than I do. Was he like a black belt, or like he was kind of a
Well, he kept a grenade in his locker that people weren't 100% sure was not live. When he got Murray in the headlock, Mark Grace came running in because he really thought Randy was going to kill him. He basically got in there to try to keep Randy from going to prison. He didn't care about John Murray. He was there to try to keep his closer
That's right.
around. Yeah. Now, this is not the same as they had Randy Meyer poster day.
That was 93.
Okay. And he blew a save, and fans threw all the posters on the field. And
my brother claims to be the first one in the bleachers that his poster hit the ground first. Yeah.
Randy said, if I'd have had my poster, I'd have thrown it on the field too.
Correct. Randy Myers was awesome.
He was awesome.
He was great. I'm happy to make a diversion.
If he still does, he coached girls basketball in the state of Washington.
You mentioned that. Sadly, this was his last season, and he was a little bit out of gas, as evidenced by not being able to put away James Mouton here before having to kick the shit out of a 160-pound stockbroker. But he would pitch for a few more years. I believe he appeared against the Cubs as a Padre in '98 down the stretch. But he came on board. He was one of the few bright spots in '93 when the Cubs got rid of Greg Maddux and then brought on this whole flotsam of Dan Plesac and Willie Wilson and Candy Maldonado and Jose Guzman. But for what it's worth, and you pointed this out, Myers saved 53 games, set a National League mark that year, broke Bruce Suter's record, I want to say, from '84, and probably was the only significant real signing between that Jim Fry disaster of '91 with George Bell and Danny Jackson and Dave Smith and Alfonso Soriano in 2007. Well, and Myers was mostly worth every penny.
Yeah, Randy, he left. He went to the Orioles. And he signed a big contract and pitched okay for the Orioles for a couple of years. And then they, I think, traded him to the Blue Jays. Okay. No, he was a free agent. He signed one more relatively big deal with the Blue Jays.
Good for him.
But in the year 2000, he was not great. And it must not have been that bad, though. The Padres were in what they felt was a pennant race against
2000.
Sure. 98. Shit. So in 98. Yeah, that was 98.
Yeah, that was they went to the series that year.
Yeah. And I don't remember off the top of my head who they were battling with, but the Blue Jays put Randy on waivers, and the Padres claimed him to block him from going to, say, the Dodgers.
Dodgers probably. Maybe the Giants and Dusty.
And the Blue Jays said, congratulations, you got Randy Myers and the rest of his contract. And the Padres were like, they didn't want him, but they had him. So they paired him with Trevor Hoffman. Even though they didn't want to. They were just trying to keep him from... They thought that the Blue Jays would just pull him back. He pitched in 21 games for the Padres down the stretch, and he had an ERA of a cool 6.28.
So back to this game, though. Myers gives up the back-breaking homer and then has to beat the shit out of a drunk that storms the field. Yep. But the game's not over.
No, and he stays in and he pitches to Brian Hunter, who singles. So now the Cubs are down 9-7. There's 2 outs in the 8th, but there's a runner on first. So they go to the great Terry Adams. He's got to save the day.
Rookie that year. Came up that year.
And so he's facing our soon-to-be Cub, Ricky Gutierrez. And Brian Hunter steals second. Then Terry throws there's a pass ball. Because who's catching now? It's Mark Parent. That's Mark Parent's second pass ball of the inning.
Good job, Mark. Like 38.
Yeah, doesn't bend at the waist or the knees. So now the runner's at third. But Terry rallies and he strikes out Ricky Gutierrez.
But they're losing, right? They're down. All right.
But you can't keep those 95 Cubs down. Mark Parent apparently in the game for his bat. He leads off the bottom of the 8th with a double. Brian McRae hits now this must have been deep. He hits a fly ball to left and Parent advances to third. Then Ho comes up and he gets a base hit. This is off Greg Swindell. Million-year-old Greg Swindell. He singles in Parent. And then Mark Grace hits a double and scores Howard Johnson, and the game is tied. And the Astros have to bring in another future Cub Dave Veers. But he gets out of it. It's nothing. Terry Adams, 1, 2, 3 in the ninth. Bottom of the ninth, the Cubs don't really do any. Oh, Shawon Dunston gets a single, and then nothing. Zeile tries to bunt him. I guess he does sacrifice him. And then Hernandez and Parent both strike out. In the top of the 10th, it's still tied at 9, and Mike Walker is pitching for the Cubs, and I couldn't pick Mike Walker out of a police lineup if I had to. But he comes in, and he's got to face, oh no, the Beige and Bagwell and Tony Eusebio. Biggio doubles, Bagwell walks, Eusebio bunts Biggio to third and Bagwell to second. And then it's the James Mouton game. He has the sac fly and gives the Astros a 10-9 lead. Brian Hunter flies out. So now we go to the bottom of the 10th, and oh, he's back. So we get to the bottom of the 10th. The Astros have just taken the lead on the James Mouton sac fly.
Here for the Scott Bullett reference, by the way.
And Dave Veers is in.
Future Cub. Regretfully.
So the Cubs need to rally, or their playoff hopes are gone. Brian McRae leads off with a single. Ho-Ho lines out to deep left field, it says. Mark Grace singles, sends McRae to third. And Sammy Sosa ties the game with a sacrifice fly to center field.
Attaboy, Sammy.
Luis Gonzalez strikes out. Mike Walker is staying in for his second inning of work. Still have no idea who Mike Walker was.
I don't either.
Maybe not a great idea because Mike Brumley is pinch hitting
Mike
for Dave
Brumley.
Veers. He homers to give the Astros a 11 to 10 lead.
Can I just stop and reveal a trivia answer? I had no idea Mike Brumley did that. And it's funny because I remember that game. I remember Scott Bullett winning it. But Mike Brumley was the extra player involved in the Bill Buckner-Dennis Eckersley trade. The Cubs acquired Mike Brumley along with Eckersley because everyone thought Eckersley was a washed-up drunk and Buckner was still productive. And he did make it up for the Cubs in '86 along with Paul Noche. That was their middle infield.
Oh, yeah.
No recollection that
Star-studded.
8 years later, Mike Brumley would actually hit a back-breaking homer. I have no recollection of that. I'm going to presently install that into my hard drive there, Andy, because that's nuts.
So Brumley gives the Astros an 11 to 10 lead. Mike Walker still out there. He strikes out Craig Shipley, but he walks the great Andy Stankiewicz. And so Riggleman is like, all right, I've probably pushed Mike Walker past the brink. And so who does he bring in out of the bullpen? He goes to his superstar reliever, Anthony Young.
The holder of the all-time record for consecutive losses by a pitcher.
Yeah. AY.
Yep.
And AY, he's just going to take care of things. John Cangelosi is up. Stankiewicz steals second. It doesn't bother AY. He strikes out Cangelosi. Then he gets the Beige to fly out to right field. So the Cubs are down 11 to 10. And who's pitching for the Astros? They bring in their closer, Todd Jones.
Oh, future Cub. Actually, he would be their closer the subsequent opening day.
No, that would be Doug Jones.
Oh, my bad.
Todd was the burly guy who also pitched for the
They both
Tigers.
had mustaches,
Yes.
though, right?
This one threw a little harder than the other one. So Shawon Dunston leads off with a single. He advances to second on a pass ball with Scott Bullett at the plate. And Todd Jones can't get Scott Bullett out. He singles to right. That ties the game because Dunston scores. Wrigley goes crazy. Riggleman, tired of watching Jose Hernandez strikes out, has him bunt, and he sacrifices Bullett to second. And then, proving that Jim Riggleman is a genius, the catcher that he brought in a few innings before, Mark Parent, gets his second big hit of the day, and he wins the game with a ground ball between second and short, which in today's game would have somebody standing right there. Scott Bullett scores, and the Cubs win and I think they're pulled within.
Well,
They
so
pull within one
meanwhile,
game of the Astros, and they're both chasing the Rockies.
that day in Colorado, two future Cub managers, Don Baylor and Dusty Baker, are going at it. And the Rockies give up 5 in the top of the ninth in Denver and lose 10-7. And suddenly the Rockies are 75 and 67 at the end of this day. The Astros are 74 and 67. The Cubs are behind them both. But
so the Cubs are what, 2 out with 3 to play?
Yes.
The Astros are 1 out with 3 to play.
That's it. Hoping the Rockies can keep losing and the Cubs can keep beating the Astros. So what happens the next day?
So that sets up another exciting game. This one is the pitching matchup of Jamie Navarro, who's having a good year for the Cubs.
He had 2 good. He pitched 2 years for the. We've discussed it. He pitched 2 years for the Cubs, and probably 2 of his. Outside of his 17-win season for the Brewers in '92, the 2 best years of his career. So I'll always remember Jaime fondly.
So he's going up against Mike Hampton, who has not yet left to go to Colorado because of the schools. It's funny because we already mentioned Denny Nagel, the other guy that went to the Rockies, and proved that, that doesn't work. You can't pitch that. It is scoreless until the top of the 6th. Let's see what happens at the top of the 6th.
Jamie Navarro pitched 8 innings.
Future Cub player and coach Dave Magadan drove in the first run of the game on a ground ball to second, which scored scrappy little Craig Biggio. And so the Astros are up 1-0. And then the Astros, they get 2 more in the 8th when Milt Thompson drives in Derek May and Dave Magadan with
former
a base hit.
Atlanta Brave and St. Louis Cardinal.
Yeah.
Definitely Atlanta Brave, right? Milt Thompson.
He was a Philly too.
Philly, my bad. I don't think the Cardinals, but a Brave.
No, I think he played for the Cardinals.
Okay, Pretty sure it's the first time Milt Thompson's name has come up.
So, the Cubs are down 3-0 going to the bottom of the 8th. Surely they got to start their rally there. And Jim Riggleman pulls out all the stops. After Howard Johnson walks, he pinch hits Mark Parent for Jamie Navarro, and Parent hits a 2-run homer. No, he doesn't. He grounds into a double play. And Brian McRae lines out, so we go to the 9th, still down 3-0. Turk is in. He gets himself in a little bit of a mess. Larry Cassian has to come in and try to get him out of it. Actually, how about this? This is some managing here. With the B with Mark Parent. I guess we'll just have to walk through this. So Brian Hunter grounds out to start the inning. Then the Beige walks. Bagwell strikes out, swinging. So now they're in good shape. Derek May is up.
Former Cub Derek May?
Yes. And the Beige is caught stealing, but he's safe on an E3, so an error on Grace. Must have got him in a rundown, threw it away. Biggio ends up on 3rd.
How is he considered caught stealing? Okay, whatever.
Well, if you were going to be out, if the error is the reason you were safe, you get a caught stealing.
Still considered caught stealing?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you don't get a successful caught stealing.
Thank you, Beloit Snappers official scorer.
Yes, but apparently it was so they ended up giving up 2 bases on the air because he ended up at 3rd.
Oh my God!
But this is where the magic gets good. Riggleman goes out. But he's going to have Larry Cassian face Derek May. But the manager for the Astros, who could be Terry Collins, we're not sure.
I'll find out.
He sends up James Mouton, the Cubs' nemesis. So what does Jim Riggleman do? He has Larry Cassian intentionally walk James Mouton, then he takes him out. Good job. Dave Schwartzbaugh comes in, of course, to face Mike Sims.
I know that sounds made up, kids, but Dave Schwartzbaugh was a real Cubs pitcher.
And he gets Mike Sims to ground out. So keeps the lead at 3. The deficit is at 3 runs. And Mike Hampton, Hampton's going to go the distance.
So picture this, kid. This is pretty thrilling. Cubs season is about to end.
Yeah, if the Cubs do not rally, they are eliminated. Season's over.
Literally. Mathematically.
Their backs are against the wall, and you can't hold down the 1995 Cubs.
Fuck no.
Hampton gets Jose Hernandez grounds out short, but then Grace singles, so they have to go pull Mike Hampton, and they go to Mike Henneman.
The old Detroit Tiger,
former Tiger closer instead of going to their future Tiger closer, Todd Jones.
Todd Jones.
So he's going to face Sammy, and Sammy singles to center, takes Grace to third. So runners to first and third.
Grace goes to first to third with only one out. Must either a soft hit single or Grace was had quit smoking for a while.
Dunston comes up with runners at first and second. Is that right?
First and third. Grace went to third.
Oh, Grace went to third, right. So first and third, Shawon Dunston. He singles to left. Grace scores. Sammy stops at second. Ozzie Timmons is due up, but Riggleman sends up Luis Gonzalez instead. And he, thanks to his, the big muscles he's already starting to build, he reaches on what they describe as a ground ball to weak shortstop second base to load the bases.
Mick Kelleher was in this game? Weak shortstop?
Yep.
Sorry.
So with the bases loaded, Luis Gonzalez has gotten a hit, and now the Astros are about to face the other guy that they gave up in the trade. Scott Servais is up with the bases loaded, down by 2 runs. He grounds out third to second. So Sosa scores from third. Dunston goes to third. Gonzalez is out going to second, and Servais is safe at first. So clearly, Scott Servais legged it out, beat out a double play to save the season.
One hell of a softly hit ball. Right, the season could have ended on that. Absolutely correct. Right, it's the end of the game.
So Howard Johnson's up, and he walks. That puts
Hojo.
So bases are loaded again, and Scott Bullett. I'm confusing my Scotts.
Yeah,
he comes up. He's got a chance to win the game, and he doesn't win it, but he ties it with he draws a 4-pitch walk off of whoever Dean Hartgraves is. That ties the game. Doug Brocail comes in and gets Brian McRae to strike out, and that ends it. But the Cubs have rallied for 3 runs on 4 hits.
Whoever Dean Hartgrave is, sounds like a talk show host. He came in for 1 batter, and he threw 4 balls, and then he left. Just pointing that out. Because he was relieved as soon as he walked Bullett.
So now it's all excited. We're tied at 3. We're going to the extra innings again. And Mike Perez is in a pitch for the Cubs.
First name check for Mike Perez. I remember Mike Perez being pretty effective on the 95 Cubs. He was a former Cardinal, kind of a veteran reliever by then. Actually, I want to say he had a nice year, as demonstrated by his performance in the top of the 10th.
Yep. He gets Tony Eusebio to strike out. He hits Mel Thompson with a pitch, but then Thompson gets caught trying to steal second. And then Ricky Gutierrez flies out. So we go to the bottom of the 10th. This has got to be a misprint. Jose Hernandez walked.
He did something good prior to 1998.
Mark Grace singled, and Jose goes to third. They intentionally walk Sammy to load the bases. And Shawon Dunston comes up, and Sean's going to win the game, but he hits the ground ball to second base, and the Beach throws.
God damn it, Sean.
Beach throws Jose Hernandez out at the plate. But that just prolongs the agony for the Astros, because Luis Gonzalez hits a roller between first and second. Mark Grace scores. Cubs win, Cubs win, Cubs win.
So it looks even worse for Bob Watson. Like, he's watching the left fielder.
Yeah.
Who'd you say? Who is the Astros left fielder in this game? It was because
it was Derek May. John Cangelosi started the day before.
Right, and now it's Derek May, former Cub.
Yes.
You're telling me Luis Gonzalez was that expendable? That's what you got? And when you need to, catch up with Colorado. By the way, Houston's not looking to be eliminated or clinch anything. They're trying to keep up with Colorado. It's the Cubs that are creeping into the picture with each victory. And now with the second consecutive walk-off, thanks to former Astro Luis Gonzalez, the Cubs they're still a game behind Houston, but now they're, and then again that day, because Colorado had lost the day before, later on, because this was a Friday afternoon game, the Rockies lose again to the Giants. So now it's a free for all.
Yeah. So with 2 games to go in this season, the wild card is down to 3. There's 1 game separating 3 teams. The Cubs and Astros are tied 1 game behind the Rockies.
And I went to this game, just so you know. I went to about 20 games that year because I had just graduated from Northern. I was casually employed and somehow found a way to go to a shitload of games. By the way, I'm just going to say this is coming out of the strike in 94. It's a weird point in history from a consumer perspective. Tickets for the longest time that summer were way below face, like way below. Maybe that's going on now. I don't know. But I remember because I was a poor postgraduate, like had hardly any, couldn't have 2 nickels to rub together, how much I was able to leverage my economic disadvantage to still get into Wrigley Field over 20 times that summer. So, but there was some effects from the strike that affected the economy of the tickets.
Well, so as you would, so this is a match. This is Shane Reynolds against Frank Castillo. Now Frank is coming off his near no-hitter.
Correct.
So you're thinking, oh, we got this in the bag. He's going to be awesome.
Right. And I'm like a Frank Castillo roadie. It's my second consecutive game, and there's my guy on the mound. Yeah.
And now that we're older and wiser, you would immediately look at this and go, oh, well, he's going to get lit up in this one. Because
he did, too.
He pitched a lot longer than he normally did last time and didn't even get the no-hitter. And he gave up 6 runs on 6 hits with 4 walks in 3 1/3. And when he left the Cubs in a 4-1 hole. And Anthony Young had to come in and try to patch things up.
It was over. It was fun while it lasted.
It wasn't over because down 3-1 in the bottom of the 3rd, the Cubs rallied for 5 runs off Shane Reynolds.
I don't remember that. I was drinking a lot. I was 23. Okay. Wow. Yeah, I'm looking at it
actually,
now.
no,
Holy
this is
shit.
before. Sorry, my math is terrible. Frank's still in. They were down 3-1, and they give him the lead. They put him up.
What happened in that 3rd inning? There's some heroics going on there.
3rd inning, let's see. Frank
Grace,
walks.
Sosa, Dunston, Servais.
Frank walks to lead off the inning. Ho-Ho reaches on well, Brian McRae grounds out to first, but Frank goes to second. Ho-Ho grounds out to the pitcher. That gets Frank to third. Grace drives him in with a single. Sammy drives in Grace with a triple. Luis Gonzalez walks. Dunston singles. That scores Sammy. And then Scott Servais reaches on an E6 that scores...
To future Cub Ricky Gutierrez, by the way.
That scores Gonzalez. So now the Cubs are up.
I think I was probably already blacked out at this point.
6-4.
Wanted to think of the early lead.
But
I was in the left center bleachers, by the way.
Castillo gave a double to Shane Reynolds to lead off that inning, which is not good. And Biggio drove in from the game with a single. Anthony Young came in. He gave up another run before he finally got out of it. So it was tied at 6 after 4. The Astros got a couple off of Turk in the 5th. Cubs got one back. Dunston doubled in Luis Gonzalez. Sean had a good week.
Yeah, he did.
Coming down the stretch.
Cubs are battling, though.
Cubs tied it in the 6th on a Grace double that scored Brian McRae. This is off of Greg Swindell pitching out of the bullpen. The aforementioned Mike Perez came in the 7th. He gave up a RBI single to John Cangelosi to give the Astros the lead back, and nobody scored after that. So who knew? John Cangelosi ended the Cubs season with an RBI single in the 7th inning of the second to last game of the season.
It's a lot closer than I imagined. It wouldn't have mattered, though, because in Colorado... No, actually, no, the Rockies still lost.
No, the Rockies had to have won the last 2 because they ended up with 77 wins.
Right.
So it didn't matter. The Astros and Cubs, they...
But still, as a 23-year-old that had like a very limited taste of success in 84 and 89, And even that 92 period that we talked about when Mike Royko made fun of all of us when the Cubs swept the Pirates in late July, he's like, you just want a taste of that. And it's like, hey, going to the park that Saturday. I'm a 23-year-old, like I said, a fresh college graduate. Can't scrape two nickels together, but somehow I'm going to be in the third row of the bleachers in left field. And the Cubs are alive, and there are 2 games left in the season. It doesn't make any sense because it's not a good team, but it happened. They were there within 48 hours of the end of the regular season. So it's kind of a novelty, because I harbor no illusions about the quality of the 1995 Cubs.
Well, and clearly, because the Cubs rode that momentum into excellence in 96 and 97.
Yes.
96, yes. They won about the same amount of games, except they had to play a full season that time, so that wasn't so good. They only played 144 games in 95, where they won 76 games the next year. And then, of course, the 97 season was just a season from hell.
Right.
And that begat the ridiculous 1998 Cubs.
Right. It went back and forth. It fluctuated because, again, from the management perspective, they were not striving to compete.
No, they weren't building. They were just every year they patched the roster.
Right.
They never built anything.
Tanked. Right. They never tanked. They had, like we said, they had their marquee stars. This team had Grace and Sosa. Sandberg would come back, although he'd be old. They always had like 2 or 3 bankable stars or what have you. And they didn't really necessarily – they had teams that were on paper not shitty, but if things go sideways, they will be. And if things break the right way, you could be some paper tiger that actually, thinks you have a shot. The 95 Cubs absolutely typify that in my book because I don't consider them a real contender. Like I said at the beginning, even aside from the teams that did make the postseason, there were a couple that were good and didn't make it, but were legit. This team came closer to the playoffs than the 2004 Cubs. And we'll talk about the 2004 Cubs, but that was a far more legitimate on paper.
Yeah, that was a
far more legitimate playoff team.
That was an actual good team.
And they were eliminated by that Friday. They evaporated so fast. Yeah. They were gone. This team was actually not dead until it still blows me away until the second to last day of the season. Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't mean that they're good. Just one of those things.
So one of the things
funny to know.
One of the things that jumps out when you look at the pitching stats is that their 5-man rotation was Jamie Navarro, Frank Castillo, Kevin Foster, Steve Traxel, and Jim Bullinger. The first 4 all made at least 28 starts, 29, 29, 28, 29. Bullinger made 24 starts. Only 2 other guys on the team made starts. Anthony Young got 1, and Mike Morgan made 4 before they said, all right, that's enough of that. Although Morgan was 2-1 with a 2.19 ERA. It only gave up 19 hits in 24 innings.
Selling high.
Yeah.
That's almost the 1995 equivalent of the 1980 Cubs having only 12 pitchers total on their roster.
So 4 of the 5 starters won double digits. Navarro was 14-6, Castillo 11-10, right. Foster 12-11, and Bullinger 12-8. Traxel, it was an odd numbered year, so he was bad.
It was his first shitty year.
7-13 with a 5.15 ERA.
This was the year after he won the bullshit mythical rookie pitcher of the year as awarded by the Sporting News. And then he sucked, and then he was an all-star in 96, and then he sucked in 97. Yeah, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so their primary relievers were
Turk. No.
Mike Perez pitched in 68 games. Turk 43. Mike Walker. I don't remember. I can't picture Mike Walker if you made me.
Now that you mention it, I vaguely recall it.
He pitched in 42 games. Larry Cassian was their lefty. He pitched in 42. He had a 1.93 ERA.
Wow. Larry Cassian did.
He pitched. How about this? This is a perfect lefty.
55.
He pitched 42 games. He threw 23 innings.
Jesus Christ.
Of course, that one, he didn't throw any innings. He came in, the only guy he faced, he intentionally walked. So
right, the Astros game. Terry Adams made his debut in 95 in Dodger Stadium, I want to say, in July of that year. And I remember he kind of like came out of nowhere, and we had high hopes. We were already planning for Randy Meyer's successor. And Terry Adams was on the team as late as 98, 99, and he just he would show flashes, but ultimately just very
Uh,
frustrating to watch.
Andy MacPhail used his deep knowledge of the Twins organization, and he brought in former Twin top prospect Willie Banks. And Willie pitched in 10 games for the Cubs, and his ERA was only 15.43.
Oddly enough, Willie Banks was actually brought in the year before by Larry Himes, believe it or
Oh,
not, because he almost threw a no-hitter himself
oh yeah, there it
on the
is. 94.
Memorial Day. Yeah, he
Yeah, he
almost
made
threw a
23
no-hitter.
starts in 94.
He himself came within about 7 or 8 outs of a no-hitter on Memorial Day, 1994. I'm surprised we didn't talk about that when the wheel fell on 1994. To be honest with you, I may have mentioned it.
Willie
Willie
Banks
Banks.
Willie Banks made 15 starts in 1995.
Okay.
None of them for the Cubs. He started 6 for the Dodgers and 9 for the Marlins. So he was well traveled that year. The handsome Rich Garces pitched for the Cubs. He would end up
The
being
handsome.
a useful reliever at times for the Red Sox.
Well, he was useful also at Wrigley Field because he could wear a white shirt and stand in front of the 400 sign in center field and turn around, and they could watch a movie off his back.
Yeah.
Because wasn't Rich Garces inordinately large?
He was a big boy, yeah.
I'm not trying to fat shame. I'm just what sprung to mind.
Cubs must have tried to sneak him through waivers on August 9th, and the Marlins snagged him. And
Was
then he
he
ended
not
up.
an sorry?
Was
Was
he
he
not?
not an effective reliever for the Red Sox before or after this? He was kind of an effective reliever for
After.
Boston,
No,
wasn't
Rich was
he?
pretty
Yeah.
good. In fact, he had one great year. Um, he had a 155 ERA in 1999 for the Red Sox. Yeah, he pitched a long time. He pitched seven. He bounced around until he got to the Red Sox. He pitched his last 7 years for them with a 378 ERA out of the bullpen, and
Damn.
yeah, he was El Wapo. He was the handsome. Um, yeah. Yeah, so Jose Hernandez played 93 games for the Cubs. He played all those games down. He was starting all those games down the stretch.
It was his second season with the Cubs. It was also Steve Bushell's last season with the Cubs, as evidenced by the fact that the Cubs were pushing him out with the acquisition of Todd Zeile.
Cubs emptied out their farm system to try to patch left field. Ozzie Timmons, Scott Bullett, Kevin Roberson all played out there. Tuffy
Yep.
Rhodes, of course, as we found out, he finished his Cubs career that season. Kurt Russell's nephew? Is that Matt Franco's relationship to Kurt Russell? I can never remember.
Is that right? Matt Franco was
Yeah.
on the 95 Cubs?
Yes.
Oh, I got to recalibrate that. I mentioned Todd Pratt, Joe Kamak, Grace. I'm just thinking
Yep.
off the top of my head.
He is the son of Larry Franco and Jill Russell. Jill is the sister of Kurt Russell, the actor.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, Matt had more of a career with the Mets, right?
The Mets, yes. How did he get to the Mets?
We've mentioned Jim Riggleman. We've got the MacPhail era. Pretty sure.
Matt Franco was traded by the Cubs to the Mets for a player to be named later. That player to be named later was not him. It was Chris DeWitt.
Oh, Joyce DeWitt's brother, which by extension would make him Blake DeWitt's brother, right?
Yeah, something like that.
According to Bruce Miles.
Yeah, Matt only played 16 games for the Cubs. And then he played 5 years for the Mets, 2 years with the Braves. He was a 7th round draft pick of the Cubs out of Westlake High School in Thousand Oaks, California, 1987.
Oh, Dallas Green's last draft. Once again, I mean, how many career at bats did Matt Franco have? Can you tell me? Can we detour for a second, Andy, and just satiate my curiosity?
977.
It's another Dallas Green draft pick that had almost 1,000 at bats. Fuck you, John Madigan.
Did he ever? Oh yeah, he played. He played in the World Series for the Mets. He got one at bat.
Holy shit!
And how
Wait,
about this? His
wait, what 2000,
yeah,
right?
yes.
Against the Yankees?
How
All
about
right.
this? The final games he ever played in his big league career, um, he batted twice. He got, um, let's see, didn't get a hit, but he scored a run in the Atlanta Braves' loss to the Chicago Cubs in the 2003 NLDS.
Wow.
How about that? Talk about your career coming full circle. He played his last game
That
in the playoffs against the team that drafted him.
that was the last game he played as a professional, you're
Yep.
saying? Wow. I cheated and pulled up the Cubs roster. I saw two names I just had to mention before we're done here. Name check, because you pretty much covered them all. Chris Nabholz, whom I remember more as an Expo, I want to say. And how about Tanyan Sturtz?
Oh, yes.
He went on to become a White Sox, like a valuable White Sox reliever years later. But he was a Cub prospect, that one of those guys that the beat writers would tease us with before we had, full.
Yep. Tanyan James Sturtz.
And 96 Cubs. In fact, he finished 1-0 as a Cub in his career.
Yeah, in both seasons with the Cubs, he had the same ERA, 9.
That's right. I'm just going to give up one run every inning I pitch. Oh, that'd be 27.
I don't know how valuable was he for the White Sox. His career ERA for the White Sox was 8.72 in 11 games.
But he was on the 2000 White Sox. That's the team that won the division.
Well,
he pitched in the playoffs?
He pitched 10 games. He made a start. And his ERA was a cool 12.06.
Well, maybe I confused it. He pitched for the Yankees as late as the 2005 ALDS. So.
He had. How about this? How about his season in 2001 with his 2002 with the Rays? He led the American League in 5 categories. He led the American League in losses, hits allowed, earned runs allowed, walks, and batters faced.
Wow!
Congratulations, Tanyan Sturtz. You made their Hall of Shame.
And a member of the 1995 Cubs.
Yes. That's what he's probably most remembered for.
Well, he should be.
Let's see. Does he have? He played on playoff teams, but I don't think he ever pitched in the.
No,
playoffs.
he pitched for the Yankees.
Oh, he did 3 ups and. Yeah, not great. He pitched in a series where they beat the Twins, because that's what the Yankees have beaten the Twins in the playoffs about 47 times. All right, so what did we learn about the 1995 Cubs?
Peak Tribune management, like post 2 after post Dallas Green. That's my take.
If 50% of life is just showing up. They showed up until until the very last day. They only played one meaningless game the entire season.
Andy, how many Cubs teams in these 32 years can we say that about, right? Pretty much all of the playoff teams plus one, right? Because the 2001 Cubs competed and died. The 2004 Cubs competed. None of them died on the penultimate day of the season. So I guess you have to, in some weird, short bus version of, qualifying this, give the Cubs their due for being alive till then. Because, hey, if you're alive, anything can happen. So, but it's a fact that they were alive. They were not eliminated till the second to last day of the season. And that would put them in company with only 7 teams out of the 32 that we're covering. So I'll have a toast to the 1995 Cubs. I don't know about you.
Sure. So if they had gotten into the playoffs, they would have faced the Atlanta Braves in the first round. The Atlanta Braves would go on to win the World Series.
That was their only year that they won it all.
Yeah, I think the Cubs matched up pretty well against them, though. Maddox was 19-2 with a 1.63 ERA.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to have to do this. Sometimes this happens. I know we've gone on for a while here. I have to refer you to one game. It just sprung to my mind. This is why we do this. Please go to a game. I'm going to find an Atlanta game against the Braves in, I want to say either somewhere in August or July. It's at Wrigley Field, and it's on a Saturday, okay? I just want to size up where the Cubs fan psyche was. So I'm glad I thought of this. August 26th, Saturday, August 26th, okay?
Okay.
Here, I'm going to go on memory. I pulled it up on Baseball Reference, but I'm not going to look at it right now. I'm just going to talk to you and tell you that I remember being in a bar on a Saturday afternoon watching this with some guys that I was playing softball with. And the Cubs, as we determined, were alive as late as August 26th. And yeah, Greg Maddux had walked out and continued to achieve more stratospheric heights. But we're not bitter about it. We're okay. We've got this guy, Steve Traxel.
Yep.
All right. This guy was the Sporting News Rookie Pitcher of the year before. Granted, he was not having the best of seasons, but this is our guy. It's okay. You can have your fancy, Leo Mazzoni manicured staff. We're okay. We're going to be fine. We're going to move on. And here it is. We're going to prove it to you fuckers. Saturday, August 26th, Wrigley Field, Cubs and Braves, Steve Traxel, Greg Maddux. We're putting all this shit on the line. Steve Traxel proceeds to retire the first 8 batters of the game. You can pull it up. I'm going to pull it up while I discuss it because I want to make sure I've got it right. I'm going strictly off memory. The 9th batter in this sequence is Greg Maddux, who proceeds to get a single off of Maddux. Or, I'm sorry, off of Traxel. It's late. Steve Traxel then fails to retire another batter in the game. If you want, I'll drop the link in because it's pretty hilarious to watch, even from a...
Yeah, he walks Maddux on a full count. And
he walked him.
Or no, sorry. No, that's right. I was bad. He gave up a single on a full count, and then he walks Marquise Grissom, gives up a triple to Mark Lemke. He walks Chipper Jones, gives up a single to Fred McGriff, gives up a single to David Justice, gives up a single to Ryan Klesko. He gives up 5 runs on 5 hits. Turk has to come in and get Charlie O'Brien to get out of it.
That's it.
And
so I'm so glad I remember this just in the nick of time. Now I feel that we've discussed the 95 season. This, more than anything, in my opinion, typifies this era of Tribune ownership, that we got this paper lion of Steve Traxel thinking that we can, and again, it's not a meaningless game. Like the Braves are running off with their division, whatever. They're going to the playoffs. They're already used to it. We're fighting for our playoff lives, and we would still be alive for a month. And we go into this game, and we're going to prove it. Yeah, it's our turn. And it could not have been more spectacular that Traxel gave us a little bit of hope. A little bit of hope. He gets the first 8 batters of the game. Then Maddox's fucking self, of course, breaks it up, and Traxel doesn't retire another batter. To me, I kind of feel that typifies the whole Andy MacPhail, the whole second half of the Tribune ownership, mediocrity by design, whatever you want to call it. It's it right there.
Yeah, that the 95 season for Maddux was his 4th straight Cy Young.
And I think it's statistically greatest individual season. It ranks up there, I believe.
Yeah, the 94 and 95 are pretty ridiculous. 94, he was 16-6 with a 1.56 ERA. He gave up 150 hits in 202 innings. He had an ERA plus of 271. Remember, 100 is league average. The next year, so now this year, 95, he's 19-2 with a 1.63 ERA. Only gave up 147 hits and 209 innings. In the 2 seasons combined, he pitched 411 innings and he walked 54 guys.
Wow.
Yikes.
That's, of course, kids, after winning a Cy Young with the Cubs.
Yeah.
Who could have seen it?
This would have been the 3rd year of that 5-year deal that he asked for with the Cubs.
I mean, it was like, no matter what he was paid, it was so worth it.
He really dropped off the next year. He was 15. He was 15-11 but he finished 5th in Cy Young balloting. He finished 2nd
Okay.
the year after that. He finished 4th and then 3rd. Yeah, so he won 4, and he came pretty close to winning 7.
Yeah. But I think pointing the arrow at that particular game to me it just typified it.
Greg was kind of the reverse Tanian Sturts that year. He led the National League in wins, winning percentage, ERA, complete games, shutouts, innings, and then ERA plus, lowest home runs per inning, lowest walks per 9, home runs per 9, lowest walks per 9, and for the first of 3 years in a row, the best strikeout to walk ratio in the National League. And he won his 5th straight Gold Glove.
Okay. To kick us when we're down.
Yeah. But I'm sure the Cubs would have, Jaime would have outdueled him in the first game of the playoffs, and they would have put the Braves on their back feet, and it would have been the Cubs who ended up breaking that. It would have been, how about this? The 95 World Series would have been the Cubs beating the Indians, and then so 2016 would have simply been the rematch, and the Cubs would have won
21 years apart. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I like this alternate history. Let's go with it. It's much preferable to the mediocrity that was the 95 Cubs otherwise. In spite of the fireworks of the last week of the season.
Yeah, I was at my first real job, and
me too.
Could play my office was in the basement of this building, but I could, thanks to Mark Cuban, on
really,
what was the name of his? He invented internet on the radio.
Right, but you were actually
net,
listening on your computer.
Yeah, and
right?
I could listen to the Cub games on the computers. I couldn't get the basement. You couldn't get a signal, so
I was close
I could
enough
listen to him on the computer.
I was working in the suburbs close enough to Chicago where the radio we had in the office could pick up Scott Bullett racing home with, I don't even know if that's accurate, but I knew Scott Bullett was involved, and he was multiple times.
I do distinctly remember never being entertained by the run at the end, but never thinking they were actually going to make it.
That's my point.
There wasn't any disappointment when they didn't make it. It was more like you couldn't believe that they kept not getting eliminated.
Right, that's all it was. They
just kept staying. It was like an inexplicable NCAA tournament run. It was like St. Peter's. You knew they were going to win the national championship.
Exactly right.
And
right,
yeah, I'm sure that Mike Pusteri, he's no way at the end of this one. He won't hear this, but he's a Purdue alum who's still crushed by the Peacocks. Upset of them because they kept them out of the Final Four. Did you know this little bit of trivia? The Purdue Boilermakers have not been to the Final Four since before Gene Cady.
Yeah, Cady never took him. Yep.
It's been
the closest
40,
they came was
42
Glenn Robinson.
Years.
Glenn Robinson in '94 because I was in DeKalb. I remember rooting for them. Who was the other guy? Quanzo Martin, who was their future coach. They were the '94 Boilermakers, but they only went as far as the Final 8. Elite 8. Sorry, Mike. Sorry, Pusteri.
They don't have the proud postseason history of the NIU Huskies, who've been to 3 NCAA tournaments.
2,
3,
I believe. Oh, besides '91 and '96,
they also went in '82.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Under Coach John McDougal.
Your buddy.
That was. Yep.
I just remember Donald Whiteside.
My buddy Carl Armato was a point guard. Guy, friend of the family. Alan Rayhorn was their star big man.
I'm more of a Donald Whiteside hitting the 3-pointer off the glass against Northern Iowa to get them into the Mid-Continent Final in 1991. If people are still listening, I'm impressed that you followed it this far for Mid-Continent, early 1990s NCAA.
But we used to call it the Incontinent Conference. Yeah, I managed to miss both. They made it the year before and the year after I left.
Yeah, you missed the TJ Lux era.
Yep. What could have been. All right, well, we gave the 95 Cubs got much more attention than anyone should ever give them, but it was fun.
That's what we do.
This podcast kind of like that season. It had some fun moments, and
Right.
it never seemed like it was ever going to end, and then it just did. So,
It's very apt.
all right. Well, we'll see you next week, Mike.
Sounds good, Andy. Thanks.
Many of us have herpes.